This is Talking Sense with Dollar Bill. I'm David, Common Sense. Complicated issues like business operations and taxes require complex explanations. Talking Sense with Dollar Bill will explain these issues in plain language and have fun doing it. We must disclose that all opinions expressed on the show are of the hosts, and we advise that you consult a tax professional or attorney regarding any financial or business decisions. We always encourage your questions. Email them to us at info@talkingsensewithdollarbill.com. That's sense with a C. And now, without any further ado, I give you your host, Dollar Bill.
And thank you for listening. And I want to let you know that we look forward to any information that you would email us and try to establish another show that will give you some insight on whatever questions you might have.
Absolutely. Oh, excuse me, everybody. Hi, everyone. Having some technical issues here. Welcome to testing. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Hey, everybody. Great to be with you. As always, Dollar Bill. Hello to all you, our terrific listeners, small business owners, and those who dream about owning a small business. You are tuned in to Talking Sense with Dollar Bill, the go-to show for all things small business. I'm your co-host, Common Sense, alongside the ever-insightful Dollar Bill. Today, we're diving deep into the art of communication with an article entitled What is Active Listening by Amy Gallo, published January 2nd of this year, 2024. For all those podcast listeners out there, this insightful piece from the Harvard Business Review explores the multifaceted skill of active listening, which is, of course, vital for every leader and team player alike. So let's get ready to listen to each other as we explore how to become the listener everyone needs.
And Dollar Bill has a suggestion that we learn how to close our mouth and open our ears.
They say that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
And to that extent, the challenge here is really realizing that sometimes the introspection that you need to commit to yourself so that you do listen and you listen intently on what someone might say so that you can digest the opportunities you have to respond to what the individual is saying.
That's so important. It's so true that, listening, active listening, and I think one of the things we're going to learn from this article is that active listening is not just about hearing what is said and, spitting it back so that the other person knows that, we got the words exactly right, but it's really about being present while the other person is speaking and being able to then, understand what is being said and speak back, elevate the conversation by adding some fuel to it, based on what you heard.
And responding to an individual who makes a comment to you or a statement is something where you might be formulating in your own mind as the person is speaking. Are you then really listening as intently as you should be when you're already formulating a response? Sometimes you should try not to establish the response until you've heard the entire information you are expected to listen to.
Absolutely, Dollar Bill. Absolutely. And definitely that is mentioned in this article, as you know. Let's dive in with some quotes that we have, which go right to the heart of what you were just saying. And the first quote is from Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he said, quote, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply."
So the response is already being formulated when they haven't even heard the total sentence or the issue that the person is attempting to state.
Right. And so, in that is an assumption, right? We're assuming when we do that as listeners, we're assuming that we know what is coming next.
And in today's world, we have this wonderful thing called artificial intelligence, which is assuming what we're going to say.
That's really interesting. I hadn't put that 2 and 2 together, but you're right. Artificial intelligence, kind of gathers up all the opinions and things and everything on the internet, and
artificial intelligence may not be a very good listener.
That's true. It even says down at the bottom of some of them that says, responses may not be accurate.
And the reason they're not accurate is because you haven't had an opportunity to complete your thought and express yourself as the machine anticipates what you are going to say.
Yeah, yeah. So on that topic, I think it's really important the inputs that you put into artificial intelligence.
And to that extent, which is my most favorite statement, I guess, to
What's
that
that?
extent.
I should know this.
Everything is to that extent.
Oh, to that extent.
I repeat that way too often. However, the fact of the matter is that when you're making decisions or trying to have a conversation, you really need to ensure that you don't anticipate what the person is going to say, because you need to listen to the balance of the statement. Ask my significant other. She'll tell you I don't listen very well sometimes.
One of the things that the article mentions along these lines is that, one of the temptations when we're listening, when we do this thing, this thing of assuming what's going to come next, one of the things that is a temptation to do is to multitask, as you're listening, start to, fiddle with your phone, look inside your email, write something else down, keep a list, something like that. And, definitely something we should resist doing, because we don't know what's coming next.
We may think we know, which is the problem,
Right.
because we haven't heard what it was that the person intended to convey to us.
Right. I heard about an experiment where people who they took married couples who had been, together as a married couple for 10 years, and they separated them into separate rooms, and they asked them 20 questions of, asking them what they thought their partner's answer would be, what they thought their spouse's answer was going to be to the 20 questions. And they got so few of them right, so many. And these were folks who they qualified them. They thought they really knew their partner, and they thought they really knew like what they would say, that they were so in tune, and they answered. I think they started off by asking them questions like, "Do you finish the other person's sentences?" and stuff like that, just to get a feel for, do they really think they know each other? And they still got so many of them.
My significant other and I have been together about 25 years or more, and the fact of the matter is that there are occasions where we finish each other's sentences.
Sure.
So it does happen.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it happens. It happens to me too. But the thing is, and they use that, I think, as a gauge. They said, they asked the couples, do you finish each other's sentences, things like that. And if they said yes, then they put them in the study.
Right.
And then they did the study and they asked them these questions apart from each other, and they got so many of them wrong.
But they responded in a totally different manner, unexpected by either.
Yeah, exactly. So it was. It's crazy. We think we know what's coming next.
And the choice or the education or the perception that we do have that insight is not totally inappropriate, but it is something that you need to control under your own possibilities, so that you realize that you still need to hold back and wait until you hear the rest of the story. I don't know how many people are familiar with a man named Paul Harvey, but he used to tell us the rest of the story.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to look that up.
Yeah, Paul Harvey, a real classic. Real classic. So let's look at the next quote. It comes from Simon Sinek, author and inspirational speaker. And he said, quote, "Listening is not understanding the words of the question asked. Listening is understanding why the question was asked in the first place."
Wow. I think I've suggested that on different occasions, where it's more important to understand the question and realize that that's the key to communicating, is if you really truly understand what the question entails, you have a much better chance of accurately answering the question.
Yeah, I mean, so often, like, I get into conversations where folks, give me give me a lot of the story before getting to the cutting to the chase, before getting to the bottom line, and things like that. And I think that one of the reasons that happens is because the person wants to make sure you understand why they're asking the question. You know?
And at the same time, what a lot of the time the question itself results in more questions that you should be creating so that you can enhance the communication you're working with.
Right. Getting back to that idea of having the conversation bring both parties to a new place when they're done, elevating the conversation with what you learn.
Because you're both questioning each other so that you can get a clarification of what exactly issue you're trying to resolve.
And the article talks about this, about how it's important to listen without getting defensive, so that you're able to really understand, where the person's coming from and bring the conversation to a new place. Let's look at the next quote. The next quote comes from Carl Rogers, a renowned psychologist. Quote, "The major barrier to mutual interpersonal communication is our very natural tendency to judge, to evaluate, to approve or disapprove the statement of the other person or the other group."
So right away, you're coming to a decision or a process where you're assessing what the person is saying, what they mean before they've even finished doing that.
Absolutely. It's exactly what we were talking about. The idea that, you want to not assume what's coming next so that you can truly listen and be present. And then you can add based on your own insight and bring it to a new level.
And when you're bringing it to the new level, that usually means that's where you raise the question to try to confirm what your perception is about that particular issue.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So questions like, am I understanding you correctly? Like that.
Yeah, and we're not trying to be psychologists. We're trying to be good listeners.
Absolutely, because, of course, the show's about small business, and great leaders are good listeners.
Not only are they good listeners, they're good memorizers too, because they will tell you what your name is even if they haven't seen you in years. It's amazing how well they will confront and or address the correct name of an individual, and that gives you some security to begin with where the person perceives, hey, they remembered me.
Oh, yeah, that's always nice. That's always nice when someone remembers your name. I read somewhere that your name is like the most beautiful sound you could hear, in a conversation, because it gives you some recognition that you're being heard, that you're being seen, like you said.
The challenges there are extreme because depending on the number of people that you're exposed to, but usually in a particular environment, if you're in a political environment, most of the politicians have the ability to remember a certain condition or a certain circumstance around which they remember the name of the person, and they'll get down to the family and say, how's your daughter, how's your son, and when you get that type of familiarity, it gives you a lot of ease and comfort in considering whether or not you're going to vote for them.
Yeah, it's really true. I've heard stories about politicians who have their staff keep note cards on people so that they can remember names and important details about a person or a business owner or something like that, so that they can remember those things, and it really establishes the connection when they come back to that person and ask them something.
And as we speak about it, we're not just relating it as it relates to the politician. We're trying to relate it as it relates to the conducting your business.
Absolutely. So important, because being a good leader, again, is being a good listener. Hey, folks, if you're like me, then you've been paying a lot more attention to your personal security and home defense these last few years. And if you really want your dollars to make sense, you need to check out our sponsor, Foxhole Armor. Their Patriot Home Defense Level 3 body armor is exactly what every American home should have sitting next to the nightstand under the firearm. Lab tested to stop up to a .308, which is the same bullet used in a military M240 Bravo machine gun. It is designed to provide a lifetime of full body protection at a fraction of the cost of traditional body armor solutions. With their already low prices of $579 on sale for $529, our listeners are able to save $50 and get free shipping by using the code $bill, that's all one word, $bill, at checkout. Talk about using your dollars to make sense. FoxholeArmor.com. Check them out. absolutely, you want to check out foxholearmor.com, and you also want to check out this article, What is Active Listening, by Amy Gallo, published January 2nd, 2024 in the Harvard Business Review. You can get it online. And let's dive into this article. Let's talk a little bit about what Amy Gallo defines as active listening. She defines active listening as a dynamic process that involves not just hearing words, but also tuning into the speaker's thoughts and feelings. It's about transforming conversations into active, collaborative exchanges. The author, she emphasizes that active listening includes cognitive, emotional, and behavioral aspects, all critical for truly understanding and engaging with others.
So she seems to be implying that if you observe the person who you're discussing an issue with, you can observe not only the words, but their manner in which they present the information.
Absolutely. And she talks about having default listening styles. You know, that we all fall into some of these default listening styles, and they are task-oriented, analytical, relational, or critical listener. And that, you know, it's important to understand what default listening style you fall into. Predominantly, you know, I think her point is that we all may, you know, do one or more of these at different times, but it's important to know which one you fall into, so that you can use that to your advantage in becoming a better listener.
And that makes sense to me in relation to whatever group you are dealing with. You not only have to listen to the single person, but the members of the group that are expressing themselves, and observe how they present the information that you should be listening to.
Right. So she talks about cognitive, emotional, and behavioral. So let's take a look at the article. She says cognitive, paying attention to all the information, both explicit and implicit, that you are receiving from the other person, comprehending and integrating that information. Emotional, staying calm and compassionate during the conversation, including managing any emotional reactions, annoyance or boredom, for example, you might experience. And behavioral, conveying interest and comprehension verbally and non-verbally.
Well, the familiar concept of, oh, he rolled his eyes. And you were listening, you were watching, and you said, well, obviously you're not as interested as I thought you were.
Oh, yeah, that's really true. I mean, there's a great book by Gerard Nierenberg about how to read somebody's body language. You know, it's a great book, and you can take a look at body language, and you can see what the different body language, what the different gestures and things that we do generally mean. And I think he makes that point in his book, you know, that, you know, it's not always this thing that it means. Like crossing your arms is not always being defensive, but generally speaking, it is.
And the challenge there, of course, is you do not really know the specifics of the response that person is presenting at that time. They could be rolling their eyes because they had a thing in their, some type of a lint or something that made them roll their eyes.
You might have something in your eye.
So the issue is not making the presumption that they're discouraged or not interested in what you're saying. At the same time, you might be able to get some insight from that depending upon the conditions under which the event occurred.
100%. 100%. So it kind of like, I think it's like a puzzle, you know, like different pieces of a puzzle. And so you want to like sort of add up the different things that are taking place, you know, in this cognitive, emotional, and behavioral, these clues that you get. And add them all together and see what it comes out to.
Even as we discuss it, we are in a judgmental stage where you're trying to judge what it is the one person means versus what it is the other person hears.
Interesting. So say that again for me.
Well, the presentation is one thing that the individual is providing to you, but you're not really sure how the recipient or the receiver is accepting the data or the information.
That's true, and that kind of gets into the idea of, you know, those questions that sort of check things out a little bit, like, you know, am I understanding you correctly?
To try to validate what it is you're actually discussing and whether or not you're truly understanding what the other party, and that's why you have a sender and a receiver, and you have to switch places as the conversations ensue.
Yeah, the article even talks about how if you're in a conversation and you happen to lose your focus for a minute, and the person is talking and you lose your focus, and so you lose the train of thought or the train of expression that's being said to you. It's best not to pretend that you didn't miss it and just keep going and just sort of assume what it is, but ask one of those questions. Say, you know what, I missed that last thing you just said. Would you mind restating that?
So validating is part of the process. And when we talk about validating, it's a confirmation of one thing that you may have not understood initially, that you want to recognize that, I may not be as smart as you think because I need you to tell me that again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about the different default listening styles, the 4 distinct listening styles, and I'm going to quote from the article, quote, "A task-oriented listener is focused on efficiency and shapes a conversation around the transfer of important information. An analytical listener aims to analyze a problem from a neutral starting point. A relational listener seeks to build connection and understand and respond to the emotions underlying a message. A critical listener typically judges both the content of the conversation and the speaker themselves."
Well, there's 4 different definitions or an array of titles or topics that we probably can address in future episodes. But the fact of the matter is we would like to think we're all critical listeners. And I really want to know that I'm able to try to develop that critical listener part of thing. And at the same time, the data person, typically when you're an accountant or you're in a particular profession, the data means a lot of methods that you might use to evaluate the information, but it isn't necessarily the only spot you want to work with.
Yeah, and I think the importance of knowing which one of these that you fall into typically, can help you to overcome some challenges toward active listening. Like, for example, if you're a critical listener, and it says here, a critical listener typically judges both the content of the conversation and the speaker themselves. Maybe it's important for you to remind yourself as a critical listener to put some of those judgments aside for the moment while you hear what's being said, so that you can listen sort of like with a clean slate, and really put your judgments aside for a moment, so that they don't cloud what the person is trying to tell you, and you can be open to some new information.
And that, of course, is the crux of the matter. You do want to be a competent and capable listener because you want to understand what it is the issue that is trying to be resolved.
Absolutely. So it's helpful to know what type of default listening style you typically fall into, and that's why we definitely recommend checking this article out, What is Active Listening by Amy Gallo, Harvard Business Review. She also talks about, once you understand how you typically listen, there are some questions that you can ask yourself to help you become a more active listener. And the first question is, why do I need to listen right now? That question really gets to the heart of, understanding and using empathy to think about what the other person might need. And I'm quoting here, using empathy to think about what the other person might need from your conversation to provide clues as to how you can best listen at that particular moment.
The thing that I hear in this comment is the fact that when you're approached with a circumstance that needs to have empathy involved, such as someone I know has just passed away, or there's an issue that the person is trying to deal with that may be health related, those are circumstances that need to express some empathy and some understanding in that you may or may not be interested in what's actually happening, but you do need to have the capacity to respect the position of the individual you're conversing with.
100%. And I think it goes even beyond the respect. Is that if you have that empathy, then you can identify a little bit with what the other person's going through, and then that can help you to get back to that goal of elevating the conversation.
The challenge of identifying what that person is going through is larger than most of us realize, because we cannot have or feel exactly the same condition or circumstances that person is having. No matter how many times we've experienced a particular circumstance, it doesn't mean that we're going to express it or feel it in the same way that the other person is experiencing.
That's so true. That's so true. So understanding that our empathic sense of things, it may be close, but it's not identical.
It cannot be identical, because we're all independent people and we are all human beings, so we are of the same quality no matter what, but we have responses that are different for each of us.
100%. That makes perfect sense. Let's look at the second question that she mentions. Who is the focus of attention in the conversation? That's the second question she mentions. And she talks a little bit about how it's important when we're in a conversation to understand who the focus is, because the person might be expressing something about what they're going through. And, our tendency might be to shift the focus to ourselves or to someone else or something like that, when the other person is really trying to convey something personal or something important about themselves.
And to that extent, or under that circumstance, you really want to be able to adhere to and listen to and empathize with the information that the person is disclosing with you, because they're being very personal and very capable of sharing some intimate or some important information that you should be paying attention to.
Right. I'm going to quote from the article, quote, "All too often we prevent ourselves from truly being able to listen deeply because of our own insecurities or head trips, like emotional discomfort or being worried about how confident or prepared we might seem to the other person."
Well, you're concerned then about that person evaluating your response.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really real.
It's definitely real that we would have a concern about how the other person is going to perceive us. But at the same time, the challenge of being independent enough that you're not concerned about it is a whole nother part of this listening process.
Absolutely. Her next question gets to the heart of what you brought up at the top of the show, Dollar Bill, and the question is, why am I talking? And the idea that you brought up was, the idea of rehearsing what your response is going to be before you even get to the end of what they're saying to you, and so you want to evaluate, why am I talking? What's going on here? What am I trying to express? Or is this a time when I should be listening?
And the challenge there, of course, is that you want to keep your ears open and your mouth shut. That's it. That's the real process of listening, and then intently understanding or trying to understand exactly what the person is attempting to convey, whether it's emotional, whether it's data, whether it's a process where they're seeking help. And you can't solve all the problems of the world. Believe me, that is not possible.
That's comforting. I like hearing that. So just some other publications or resources you might be interested in if you like this article and topic. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. Classic book, includes a deep dive into empathic listening and a key component, which is a key component that is of active listening. Just Listen by Mark Goulston. Goulston is a psychiatrist and business consultant, offers practical advice on how to become an effective listener. And Dare to Lead, which is a podcast by Brene Brown. A podcast often this podcast, that is, often explores the importance of vulnerability and empathy in leadership, including how active listening is a critical skill for leaders. So with that, there's the music, and we've got just about 30 seconds left to the show. I wonder, Dollar Bill, are there any final thoughts that you have for our listeners?
I think that it's so important to be able to listen and listen well. And I'm hoping that this program has given you some insight as to how to accomplish good listening, and I hope that I'm able to learn from my own recommendations. And all I can say is thank you for listening, and may your cents turn into dollars.